If I had to tier rank the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide, that thing would be sitting way down in like Z tier. The book was nothing but a disappointment and a missed opportunity to me. I wanted nothing more than to love the book. And make no mistake, it contains a ton of valuable and great information if you could manage to get through its pages and seemingly completely nonsensical organization. I look at this book probably the same way that my parents looked at me when I worked at a bowling alley for a few years. No hate to anyone that works at bowling alleys. I love bowling and bowling alleys. I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. Anyway, I haven't exactly been shy about my dislike for the old DMG on this channel, and I actually did tier rank it, and I put it in F, not Z, so I guess I'm a filthy liar too. I should probably clarify at this point that I have not received an advanced copy of the DMG, and not only am I not being paid for this video, but I bought the book with my own money, so I can assure you that everything I'm about to say is my own thoughts and impressions. Also, a huge shout out to all of my channel members as usual, but especially to those in the Champion tier, Julian, Corel, and Finiki, and the Hero tier, Jackal3 and Jumpy Sonic Bear. Your continued support truly means the world and helps me get one step closer to making all of this a sustainable thing, so sincerely, thank you all so much. Anyway, the day that I've been looking forward to for years finally arrived this week when we got access to the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, and I'm just gonna cut to the chase. The book slaps. It's a total banger. But what surprised me is why I like it so much, because it's not what I expected to like about it going into it. I had fully expected that the 2024 DMG was more or less just going to be a much better formatted version of what we had in 2014, with a few things added here and there like Bastions and stuff like that. I fully expected a book that was going to be full of variant rules and niche situations and optional additions to the game that can help DMs that really care about the nitty-gritty get it all sorted out. Like, for context, I've been working on a video about the facing rules in the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide for a few weeks, and I've held off on finishing it because I was waiting to see what the new book would include about it. And spoilers, there is nothing about facing in the new book. In fact, there are almost no variant rules at all. And that, as it turns out, is exactly why I think the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide is as good as it is. For the first time in 10 years, the Dungeon Master's Guide actually feels like a guide for Dungeon Masters. And yeah, sure, that might sound like a small and obvious thing, but the reality is just that the 2014 book simply didn't deliver on that. It was much more of a world builder and rule junkies compendium. And while those might be things that live in the domain of the DM, make no mistake, it's just not the only thing that they do. The 2014 book was scant on many details that involved actually running the game and helping your players and properly preparing for sessions, organizing a group, setting expectations, dealing with conflicts both in and outside of the game. You know, the things that we all do as a DM. But to its credit, it did have plenty to say about creating currency and your own pantheon of gods. I know I'm going a little bit hard on the old book, which is probably unfair, and I do see that, but what I'm trying to get at though is just that the 2014 DMG just felt like a missed opportunity to do what the title says it does, to guide Dungeon Masters. Fortunately, this is something that the 2024 version of the book has accomplished to a wonderful degree, so let's talk about it. Like I alluded to earlier, when I opened up the new DMG, I was fully expecting it to be full of alternative or variant rules that you can opt to use or not during your campaign, and I honestly think that's kind of what I wanted. I'll admit, I was a bit disappointed at first while I was skimming its pages to not see any of what I expected to see, what I wanted to see. I was reading through it and trying to figure out what I was even going to talk about in this video, but the more that I read, the more that I realized that the design team was simply not just trying to make a better 2014 DMG. They were truly working to create a different book that improves where it makes sense and reimagines just about everything else. Before I get too far, I'm not going to say the book is quote-unquote perfect. No book is perfect, and no book can possibly suit the needs of every potential reader. But that wasn't the point either. And I mean, there are plenty of people around here that will gladly tell you that you don't need a book to tell you how to have fun, and that's completely true. But as far as I can tell, this book is not telling you how to have fun. It's just trying to provide sufficient guidance and support to help enable or facilitate your fun. This new DMG embraces way more than ever the fact that the Dungeon Master is very much also a player of the game, and it shows. I remember when I started playing and feeling lost and confused and asking myself questions like, what happens if my players just don't do this thing? Or what if they don't find that door? Or what if they just ignore this obvious prompt or hook? And the new book has answers to all of those questions and so much more. And to be clear, yeah, obviously you can find similar advice and information online, whether it's through YouTube or Reddit or some other medium, it's all there. But what it wasn't was embedded within the official book that the DM might purchase to help them figure those things out. If you're just jumping into the game for the first time, you might not know which online sources are reliable, or you might not want to watch hours and hours of videos or read dozens of articles. What you might want, and I know I did, is just an official book published by the company that made the game that acts as a companion to the player's handbook to help both understand the vision and purpose of what I'm about to get myself into. None of that is to say that the other online resources are bad. They're not. I make one of those resources here. Most offer way more breadth and depth than a single book could ever hope to achieve, but that's the beauty of having access to both. This is not a zero-sum kind of deal. Alright, so you've heard me ramble long enough about the book in general, so let's take a short chapter-by-chapter look through it. Chapter 1 is the basics, and it really covers just that, the basics. This chapter is truly geared toward brand new or first-time DMs, and I'm so happy that they finally included something like this. The chapter goes over everything from the role of the Dungeon Master to how to find players to guidelines for preparing a session, examples of play, and emphasizing that there is no one right style to run a game, but rather that everyone might have their own unique style. I particularly enjoyed the preparing a session section, which talks about what your party should be able to cover in approximately 1 hour of play, which can be a very helpful barometer to use when determining how much or how little to prepare. And then it doubles down on that by following up with information about what the important things are to prepare if you only have 1 hour to prepare per week for your games, but then expands on that if you have some more time, like if you've got 2 or 3 hours per week. Obviously, all of this is just guidance. Nothing is a hard rule here, but I love that they included it. My players have literally spent an hour of session time examining a hole in the wall that they were suspicious of, and I've absolutely spent like 4 hours just lost in the sauce, painstakingly creating the individual shops and inventories that might exist inside of a town. So it's great to see some of the things to help keep you on track and focused, even if you are a seasoned dungeon master. Probably my favorite section in chapter 1 is the players exploiting the rules section. The level of self-awareness that reeks from this page is just staggering. I especially love the rules aren't physics section, where they basically tell everyone to chill with the peasant railgun already. Jokes aside, I feel very lucky that I've never had problems like this arise at my table, but I know how often it does come up, so it's really cool that they've thought to include it here. In chapter 2, which is called Running the Game, things start to get a little bit more specific to the game itself, rather than the more meta discussions that exist from chapter 1. Here we start to get some thoughtful insights about identifying and playing to the strengths of the different members of your group. They recognize that you don't need to have everyone all want to be focused on combat or storytelling. It's more about just how to engage with your players for what they're looking for and tips on how to support that type of fun. My favorite one here was the socializing player. One of my brothers was a player in my campaign for a while, and this was him to a T. He played because he wanted to hang out with everyone. He paid attention to the story and played along well and was never disruptive, but he wasn't there to min-max or to get deeply involved in his character's backstory. It's great to see the wide swath of player types that they've recognized here. Beyond even that though, there's tips for narration for running games with multiple DMs even, or what to do when the players might not be able to make a session, and what attack rolls and saving throws are, and when to even bother calling for rolls, and the relevance and the importance of consequences, and just so much more. They describe how to use success at a cost or degrees of failure if you're looking to add a bit more granularity to your games, rather than a strict pass-fail system, but it's not framed as an optional or variant rule. It's just another way to help run your game. I mentioned this a bit earlier, but this is what I've realized I love about the new book. It is no longer this intimidating tome of forbidden knowledge. It's just information about things that may or may not happen in your game and advice about how to handle it, with some poisons and magic items sprinkled in for good measure. I think there's technically only one thing labeled as a variant rule, and it's just an alternative way for leveling up. The old book was filled with random tidbits that you truly never know existed until you pored over it, and then you'd get randomly roasted online by someone saying, actually, on page 273 under the cooking section, it very clearly explains what happens if a character goes bankrupt from crippling damage and can't make repayments on their loan and is forced to default on their keep. I can't believe that you didn't know that. I have some serious unresolved issues with the old DMG. But seriously, almost none of that is here. It's just, here's the thing, here's some advice, and it's so refreshing. There's a whole section here on running exploration, which I found to be really fun and thoughtful. I think this is an area that many of us struggle to run effectively and can often hand-wave it, but here they provide a solid structure by breaking overland travel down into 3 phases with distinct starting and endpoints, some weather and conflicts, and it's so simple, but so effective and reliable. It's great to see it here. Chapter 3, the DM's Toolbox, gets even more specific and gives you most of what you'd want to know about running chases and various hazards, poisons, traps, and a whole lot more. Now, for as useful as this section is, and it truly is nice to have all of these things condensed into one easy to find and navigate portion, it's also the section that I feel the most let down by. I can't help but feel like they could have done more here without abandoning their mission of keeping things on the lighter show don't tell side. For example, to me, the biggest disappointment was a section for guidance on creating a creature. It starts with a section called Minor Alterations, which it goes into things that it suggests you can change to alter or reskin a monster in a game. It's not so much telling you how to make anything new, as it's kinda just telling you how to make some small tweaks. It then shows all the different traits that a monster might have, and sure, this is all great information, but considering it started with a section called Minor Alterations, I intuitively thought that it would lead to a section called Major Alterations and really dive into the nitty-gritty of monster creation, kind of like what we had in the 2014 DMG, but hopefully in a way that was actually comprehensible. But alas, nope. The section just ends, and I'm hopeful that they may have moved the more in-depth guide to monster creation into the new monster manual coming out in February, but I suppose we're just gonna have to wait and see on that. Anyway, this same trend is also true of basically all the creating sections. Whether it was creatures, magic items, spells, it's all very light and incredibly surface level. This is probably the one section of the book where I truly feel like more could have and maybe even should have been done. This section also contains some guidance for running mobs, which are like hordes of enemies, which have famously always been challenging to run effectively and efficiently in 5e with the standard rules, but this table is just pure chaos. It's giving thick 2014 energy. I don't even know how else to describe it. Now, admittedly, once you take the time to figure it out, it's actually kind of cool and useful, but it's just a lot to take in. I'm glad that they at least tried to provide some information on this very often discussed and challenging topic, but I'm not totally sold on this yet. Maybe once I get a chance to actually play with it, but who knows. Chapter 4 moves on to creating adventures. I should stress that this is not so much about world building as it is about understanding the structure and foundations of a solid adventure, which, to be honest, I would argue is far more important than the specific setting anyway. Once your fundamentals are set and feeling sound, you can fairly easily adapt it to just about any setting you want. I can definitely see some players also being let down by this, but we'll touch on that a little bit later. This chapter goes over establishing the premise, the conflict, the types of adventures, and levels of challenge that might be appropriate depending on the level of the party involved, how to draw in and engage players with hooks, how to reward those players, and even how to know when to end the adventure. It's a solid chapter with good advice. Probably the most controversial section of this chapter is the planning encounters section, which is great in a sense that it does emphasize that there are more types of encounters than strictly combat ones, but obviously the combat one has the most meat. It provides some metrics for building out your combat encounters and still uses an XP based system, but has done some renaming and trimming down. Easy, medium, and hard encounters have been changed to those of low, medium, and high difficulty, and the deadly section is gone. The budget provided seems largely similar to those in the old DMG, but they definitely escalate much higher as the levels progress, which does suggest that our assumption that player character power is a lot higher, even in comparison with the new monsters, is likely to be correct. Now, the massive caveat here is that we have yet to see the new monster manual, so it's probably too early to truly test this out and give any meaningful feedback on it just yet, but I am looking forward to doing that. The chapter ends with 5 small sample adventures, which are truly sample adventures. They're like half a page each, but honestly, they get the job done and give some great ideas for different types of encounters you might not have thought of. I like how the level 7 one describes a scenario that takes place over the course of a few hours during multiple dances at a ball, where players are trying to discover different things along the way. It really does help show what the breadth of the game is, and I'm here for it. Chapter 5, Creating Campaigns, is essentially everything in Chapter 4, but just amped up to a bigger scale. It provides more concrete advice for tracking character arcs and development, different overlapping conflicts, the different flavors of fantasy, how to start your campaign, including info on a session 0, and even advice for knowing how to end a campaign, which can often be much harder than you might expect it to be. The chapter ends with a smaller scale version of a full campaign setting, and here we get Greyhawk, one of the most beloved and famous settings in D&D's history. What's cool here is just how much they were able to cover and show in such a relatively small amount of pages. It really lends itself to helping a DM feel like if they wanted to create their own campaign, it doesn't need to take years of their lives and an encyclopedic knowledge of the game. Something I should mention is, much like in the Adventures chapter, this one is really not all that focused on world building so much as it is on understanding the structure of a campaign. This is a recurring trend in the DMG. The 2014 book spent what I would consider to be far too much time on it, and this one may have not spent enough. I'm not entirely sure yet. What I suspect is that they will leave a lot of the details of world building and probably even those expanded and alternate or variant rules to those specific campaign setting books that will come later on down the line. Not only does this just kind of make sense from a business perspective to sell more books, but it can also help keep things feeling a little bit more focused in each respective book rather than kind of all over the place. So there is something to be said for that. Chapter 6 is Cosmology, and it's honestly a pretty short one. This is really just the design team trying to double down on their notion that the default campaign setting of 5e is the multiverse, which is basically just a cop-out, but hey, it's fine. It does actually contain some fun and nice lore and information that is often discussed during some games, but rarely gone into because of how complex planar travel can make campaigns sometimes. Chapter 7 is Treasure, which covers all the magic items as well as treasure tables that you can roll on, which is always fun. We finally get specific magic item prices, which is great, that it's not in that crazy range that it used to be, but it's still pretty generic. Each price is just listed by the rarity and that's it. You get a little bit more granularity here in that, say if you wanted to buy a +1 plate armor, you just add the cost for a rare item, which is 4,000 gold, to the price of plate armor, which is 1,500, which now brings the total to 5,500 gold pieces. It does the job and it's simple enough. I think I'm pretty satisfied with it. Beyond all the magic items, which there are a lot of, I like that they've also changed the random tables to be more focused on the types of treasure. They now have 4 treasure tables: Arcana, Armaments, Implements, and Relics, which can help give the DM a little bit more agency in the type of treasure that they're about to give out, while still having it be at least somewhat random in nature. I'm not going to cover the actual items here, there's just way too many. I may do some more videos on them in the future though, if that's something that people are interested in. Chapter 8 is Bastions, which is more or less a home base for your characters. There's also far too much to cover here than I can do in this video. I've actually already covered them before during the Unearthed Arcana process when they were first revealed, so I'll leave that video linked in the end cards for anyone who is curious, but they do function almost entirely the same as they did then. The short version is that starting from level 5, you can build your own Bastion, which is something that you can use to craft items or perform research, make some money, brew potions, and honestly a whole lot more stuff. It's designed to be more of a background activity that happens throughout a campaign and doesn't even require the players to be present to still have things happen. It's far from a new idea, but it's a welcome one to see directly embedded within the pages of the book. Lastly are the 3 appendices. One for the lore glossary, which is basically a trove of information about a whole bunch of creatures and places and things that get name dropped all the time throughout the various adventure and campaign books. As a self-proclaimed lore junkie, I really enjoy having this kind of thing here because it can be so easy to forget a small detail, and it's great to have one quick and easy to access location just to find it all. Appendix B contains maps. There's not really a whole lot to say about it. They're pretty cool. There's 15 of them, and they range from things like farms and manors to boats and volcanoes. And Appendix C contains all of the tracking sheets, which are probably one of the simplest and simultaneously greatest additions to the new DMG. I love the game expectation sheet, which helps you almost lay out the social contract of a game before you start. This can be particularly helpful if you're running or playing in games online with people that you might not actually know very well. The travel planner helps you break down and keep track of those different phases of travel that I mentioned earlier. I will say that the campaign conflict sheet feels a little bit more lackluster and that it's really just 3 boxes with some lines in them. There's not a whole lot of inspiration there, but I do get that the point of these is to really just help spur the notes in the first place and to help keep your players engaged in what's going on, so I do appreciate the effort. I gotta say though, I especially love how beautifully and whimsically designed all of these sheets are. It truly does just put a smile on my face. Overall, the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide isn't a book that's telling you how to have fun. It's providing you with the tools that you might need to relieve much of the pressure or stress that you might feel while playing or running a campaign. It can be so easy to just say, don't worry about it, just follow your instincts and do whatever feels like the most fun. But I don't think that advice recognizes that doing so requires a significant amount of both talent and bravery. If you told me like 6 years ago to just not think about it and have fun, I can assure you that I would not have had fun. I would have been constantly stressed out. This book exists for the thousands of DMs like me that prefer just having something to refer to even if we don't feel beholden to it. It's just nice to have it there and something to help us along, whether it's our first session or our 300th one. And that to me is what makes this book special. For the first time, the DMG truly feels like it knows what it is, and that is a breath of fresh air. It might not be perfect. There's a few things that I mentioned in this video that I wish they could have gone deeper on, and some might be very disappointed that so many of the world building elements have been cut, but I think that it was all done in an effort to actually provide a better experience for the reader and the DM, and I think they truly succeeded on that. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video about the new Dungeon Master's Guide. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. I'm really excited to hear what people have to say. Check out some of my other D&D videos, but otherwise, take care.